The mind's entire goal is to take your power and control you. I would be lying to you if I told you that your mind was supposed to be your friend. It's not. Your mind's entire goal is to take your power and control you. Your mind is wired for your survival. It has one job and one job only. Now, if you've ever struggled with anxiety, self-doubt, and fear, I'm going to give you everything you need to take back control of your mind and restore your power. But before I can unlock that wisdom for you, I need to warn you about the one thing that keeps people stuck in life on that endless loop of stress and anxiety. Now, the main reason people remain stuck in life is because they never raise their frequency beyond a place of survival to a state of creation. Now, the whole reason I'm starting off this video by telling you that your mind is not your friend is because it truly is biologically wired for survival. Thanks to natural evolution, our mind has been in a state of fight or flight fundamentally throughout the course of human existence to make sure that our bloodline, our lineage, humanity itself continues on. Now, back in the day, we used to be struggling to deal with saber-toothed tigers, natural disasters, no shelter, no food, no water. That's why we have a fight or flight response. Now, did you know that we are the only mammal that when we go into a fight or flight response, we cannot find a psychological baseline again for 30, 45, maybe even an hour of time after. Versus if you see in a video of a deer get chased down by a lion and almost die, 10 seconds after that, he's back to grazing and eating grass. So this presents a unique challenge in itself and a unique level of mastery. We need to take back control power from our mind and start to use our mind to our advantage to unlock whatever we want from this life. Now, you have to understand that when people remain in a place of survival and are unwilling to move into that state of creation, it's not because they don't want to. They remain unconscious to the fact that their programming is creating the life they experience. I said unconscious because people don't understand that nearly 90% of their experience is governed by thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and programming that were implanted in our experience from the beginning. Now, the thoughts, beliefs, and values that have been fed to you by your parents, your life experiences, media, and school systems are controlling your reality against your will unless you do something about it. Now, you have to understand what you're working against here. So the first thing I want to start off is with the structure of your mind. Now, 10% of your mind is ran within your control. That's the conscious experience. 90% of your mind is governed by deep patterns, habits, and intuitive programs that are integrated into our being throughout the course of our experience. Now, the unconscious is the deep-rooted stuff, right? The childhood experiences, the fact that our heartbeat runs without us having to think about it. It can also be things like patterns of trauma that we've suppressed throughout the course of life. Our subconscious is a layer above that, right? Subconscious things are patterns that we engage in that are programmed in a more regular manner, right? Like why we pick up our phone when we're bored to get that short-term dopamine, or why some of us go to smoke weed or eat snack to numb ourselves when we're facing tough thoughts or we're having a tough time in life, or we're just bored and we need some dopamine for the sake of the experience. Now, once you start to understand and comprehend that your mind is not your friend and that you are actually working against 90% of this programming to take your life back, it's time for you to understand kind of the energetics behind emotions, right? Energy in motion is emotion. Now, when we are looking at emotions, we have elevated emotions and we have survival emotions. When you're in a state of survival, you're going to be more aligned with the concept of matter or our physical experience, right? This is when you go out the night before, you drink, you eat like shit, and you wake up the next day and you just feel dense. You are just sunk in bed feeling like a shell of your existence. That is because you are in a lower frequency of being. You're in a survival emotion. Now, when you are engaging in things that are better for yourself and you are starting to elevate your experience, you start to be less matter and more energy and experience elevated emotion, right? Fundamentally, energy is a frequency. Now, we know that physical things inherently are particles vibrating at a lower frequency. So the denser frequency, the slower waves, make up our physical experience. Now, the faster waves, the quicker paced things, allow us to rise into higher levels of energy. Now, one thing I was thinking of as I was kind of preparing this for you and getting ready to just make a video on this, I realized that when someone like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about the importance of meditation, because it opens up that gap in between a brain impulse, a thought, and a compulsion, and our ability to act on it and actually bring that into the physical world, we start to open up that infinite potentiality. Now, I've kind of been playing with this thought that, hey, maybe the highest frequencies that can't be measured in our physical experience actually move us into that quantum realm of potentiality where it is of the mind, that there is no physical manifestation of that thing yet. Which is why I want you to learn that eventually your goal is to go from survival to creation. That's why one of the first things I talked about over here is you have to go beyond a place of survival to a state of creation. Now, I mention that because you are going to increase your frequency, increase your state of being to a place that's so high, you start to create your experience, that you start to be so in tune and aligned with yourself and your inputs and your experience that you can impact the physical matter. That your frequency literally impacts reality itself and you start to create. Now, the higher frequency waves at the top are vibrating faster and therefore closer to the vibrational rate of energy and less to that of matter. You can see that the slower wavelengths, the more material energy things become. Thus, the survival emotions ground us to be more like matter and less like energy. Emotions such as anger, hatred, suffering, shame, guilt, judgment, and lust make us feel more physical because they carry a frequency that is slower and more like that of physical objects. However, the more elevated emotions, such as love, joy, and gratitude, are higher in frequency. As a result, they are more energy-like and less physical and material. Now, people think that they want the pleasure of the physical world because it's been programmed into us, because it's such a short-term spike of emotion and spike of dopamine when we get to experience these things, right? Making a lot of money, having sex, smoking weed, drinking and partying. That is short-term pleasure. But that makes tomorrow harder than today. Because you're choosing the easy now, your tomorrow is going to be harder. So when you are choosing the easy now and you are putting off the inevitable, you start to allow your mind to become your master. You start to allow the animalistic impulses and the survival mechanisms on our basic level of experience to create the life we want. Versus if we flip that and we start to make elevated decisions because we understand how our unconscious patterns, our unconscious needs, our unconscious habits and behaviors are impacting our lives, and we start to change that, we start to rise in frequency, unlock a level of self-respect, unlock a level of self-confidence, and we start to create the life we want. Now, anxiety, self-doubt, and fear are familiar experiences, meaning as our body runs on autopilot programming, these are the thoughts and emotions that replay on repeat habitually against our will. Now, what I mean by that is that no one really wants to experience anger, guilt, and fear. It's just a program. It's just what we have come to expect from life. Meaning, hey, we've gone through these things so much, we just expect it. This is why Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about the thinking and feeling loop of guilt. I'm a bad parent. Life is too hard. I am guilty. Did I do something wrong? God is going to punish me. Nobody loves me. I'm worthless. These feelings influence your thoughts, and your thoughts influence your feelings. It becomes this never-ending pattern of experience, and it's what we come to expect from life. But since we're starting to understand that, hey, Naturally, we chose to engage in behaviors and thought patterns that validate this experience. I'm gonna be transparent with you and describe something I used to do. I would smoke weed at night, snack, and wake up the next day feeling like trash. Then I would spend the rest of the day fighting the reality I was self-destructing. Meaning I would do things I knew weren't good for me, and I would spend the next day in a conscious place trying to fight that self-judgment, to fight that self-hatred that was kind of validating the experience I was afraid of in the first place. Now, what I had to do was look in the mirror and take accountability for what I was experiencing. I learned that we can alter the inputs of our thoughts and emotions and behaviors to develop a new self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm calling it a self-fulfilling prophecy because on autopilot, our thoughts create our emotions and our emotions create our thoughts. That's fundamentally what's going on thanks to Joe Dispenza. And when we create this new self-fulfilling prophecy, we can do it in service of a happier, healthier, and a more fulfilling life. Now, the whole reason we need to understand these things in the first place is because it's all about becoming the creator to our experience. Now, I think fundamentally your goal should be to become the creator of your reality. This means that you are going to bring unconscious thoughts, beliefs, and values to the light and start using them to reshape your goals. Now, once you start to realize like, hey, this is just kind of like a biological process that I'm engaged in. It's electrical stimuli. I do not need to define myself by this identity that's been created. Without my awareness, we can stop being so upset with ourselves. We can stop judging ourselves so much. We can be like, hey, if I was able to do it unconsciously, let's see what happens if I take some time to do it consciously. Now, I believe the simplest mindset to adopt is something along the lines of this. Number one, the life you are currently living is a product of who you currently are. What I mean by this is that if I'm experiencing a poor amount of income, if I'm experiencing unhealthy relationships, if I'm experiencing unhealthy eating habits and I'm gaining fat, like I am subconsciously manifesting all of these things in my life, right? Like I'm choosing something that's easier and less fulfilling and more of a coping mechanism and a cop-out for myself. Versus the latter of that is the life you want to live will be a product of becoming the individual equitable of that experience. Let me repeat that. The life you want to live will be a product of becoming the individual equitable of that experience. So when I was $80,000 in debt and I was smoking weed and I was partying too much, I had a toxic relationship, I was manifesting that for myself because that life was a product of who I was. I was choosing the things that were validating the familiar negative experience over choosing the things that would create the better experience for myself. Now, this is why the concept of faith is so important. Because when you make this shift, you're not going to immediately see it in the physical world. You are naturally going to expect that external validation, right? We've been programmed to chase short-term dopamine, these short-term senses of validation, which is why it is going to be a matter of changing your life entirely. And I might as well get into the next concept because you can logically assess your existence and analyze yourself to a core, or I can help you skip all the nonsense and unlock a high-level tactic to changing your life. And this high-level tactic is going to be thanks to Dr. David R. Hawkins and his book, Power versus Force. So I highly recommend you check that out. Now, what I want you to understand is that force signifies a low frequency of being. You have to force your hand because your essence and being is not in alignment with what you desire at your core, right? If I was smoking weed and I was drinking and my business was $80,000 in debt, but I was like, hey, like I want to make all this money. No, I was $80,000 in debt because I was doing things that didn't align with me making a lot of money. Versus if I was aligning with power, you become what you were looking for externally. Instead of seeking love, you start giving it and embodying the traits of it. In turn, attracting all the things to you as you are of the highest frequencies. Now, what do I mean by aligning with power? You become what you were looking for externally. Love is like gravity. It just is. It is validated in its existence whether we can prove it or not. It is happening whether we have an equation for the experience or not. And I chose love because it's one of the highest states of emotions, because unconditional love means that there is love to be without condition. A mother's love can be unconditional. Your love for the world and the purpose you give can be unconditional. Now, instead of seeking things, you can have that in your life by giving it. Doesn't that make sense? And embodying those traits. So if I want to experience wealth, I can start to embody the traits of a wealthy individual. Now, wealth is a broad concept, right? There is financial wealth, but that financial wealth manifests in giving. I can give things out of abundance, whether it be financially, physically, in service, emotionally, out of love. That signifies a level of wealth and abundance. I start to ruminate power because instead of seeking something externally, I'm validating it and fulfilling it internally. This is a high-level concept. Instead of immediately trying to take and being selfish, you can be selfless and give to the world, which will in turn return that, right? So instead of taking off the bat, I want to give. I want to give to the world, which will in turn return to me, right? You see that if I try and take off the bat, that is finite, that is scarce. Versus if I give, then I can demand more of myself. Now, the final thing that I want to touch on is the concept of the master and the slave. Because my goal with this video is to help you get one step closer to restoring your power and control in your life. When your mind is running on autopilot and you are becoming a victim to old patterns, habits, and suffering, whether you like it or not, you start to spiral into utter chaos. You are the slave to a reality you are not consciously creating. Now, when you begin to implement a higher level of awareness and understanding, you can start creating your reality as you have a more in-depth understanding of how your experience is playing out. Now, the final graph I want to touch on is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks about a predictable future and a familiar past. Now, the truth is you want to be here right now. This is why he calls it the generous present moment, because once we're in the present moment, there are infinite possibilities that exist in the quantum field as electromagnetic frequencies as you combine a clear intention with elevated emotions. That is the signature you send into the field, a clear intention, right? Your thoughts and elevated emotions, a high frequency. When there's a vibrational match between your energy and the energy of that potential, the longer you're conscious of that energy, the more you will draw that experience to you. That's the biggest thing I want you to take from this, is that the reason I mentioned that moment between your impulse and your action, where your meditation is the ability to create that present moment of the now, that is actually what you want. That is how you become the master and not the slave, because the slave just goes from impulse to action, impulse to action. But the master can feel an impulse, feel the need to smoke weed, can feel the need to text their ex, and can take a deep breath and restore control and power of their mind to themselves. Your lowest self must submit to the will of your highest ideals, living with integrity, sacrifice, doing hard things, challenging yourself to grow, and always is an equation to changing your life for the better. Now, if you want to see more videos from me, go check out 2 of my other videos. I break down some higher level spiritual concepts to help you outsmart the game of reality and just in general attract a better experience for yourself. But going forward, I want to do my best to just give you a level of knowledge and insight that served me in attaining everything I wanted from this life, right? I've been $80,000 in debt. I've been addicted to weed. I've partied. I've been through the ringer. I've experienced some immense suffering in my life, and it took me going all the way in depth to uncover this knowledge to serve myself. And the truth is you don't have to do that. I want to save you the journey. I want to save you the time. I want to save you the trips around the sun, the karmic loops of experience that it took me to uncover this level of wisdom to serve myself. And hopefully you can take some of my wisdom and wisdom that I've distilled and synthesized from some of the greatest thinkers and people of our times to better improve your life. So the mic cut out like right at the end there. But if you're enjoying this type of content and you want to see more from me, drop a like, subscribe. 2025, we're all focused on building our brand, increasing the amount of impact we have on people, and just sharing our story to build a community of like-minded people that want more from themselves. So drop a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.